I'm Tim, the Brand Weaver, and this is Branding for Breweries, the podcast that helps you grow your brewery, build a better brand, and connect with more drinkers. Each week, I'm joined by the brightest minds in the beer world, sharing practical tips to help your brewery stand out and sell more beer. Let's get stuck in. What up, 24-hour party people? It's Monday. Well, it's Monday if you're tuning in live. If you're listening to this on the podcast, it could be any day of the week. Ooh, magical digital realms of content, aren't they enjoyable? But I am Tim, otherwise known as the Brand Weaver, and you are listening to Branding for Breweries, the show that, as the intro says, brings the brightest minds in the beer world to your earballs and eyeballs to help your brewery thrive, survive, and just get all that lovely liquid out there to the people who need it the most, the public. We're serving the public here, people. And today with my guest, it is no exception because I am joined by Ailsa Cargill. She is a PR pro and expert to well-known drinks brands across the globe. And Ailsa's just going to help us to understand what exactly PR is. Because I kind of feel that whilst it might be talked about an weeny bit in the brewery world, I don't think it's talked about enough when it comes to sitting that alongside branding, marketing, sales, and all the other good stuff. So, without further ado, everyone welcome Elsa to the stage. Woo!
Hello.
How are you, my friend? Are you well?
I am good. Thank you for such an amazing intro.
I do my best. It's important to hype everyone up when they come on the show.
Yeah, especially on a Monday.
Exactly. Yeah, so you've got to get over the weekend nice and quick. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I think it's going to be a really enjoyable chat, diving into what PR is, kind of like PR for dummies in this respect. I'm not calling brewers dummies, by the way. That's a massive caveat. We're just going to make it simple, right? So Elsa, before we begin, would you be kind enough to kind of give the listeners an intro to yourself, who you are, what you do, where you're from, and who you've worked with in the past, please?
Yeah, sure. So very brief intro. I'll try to make it short because I do have a bit of a weird background. I'm British, English mom, Scottish dad, born and raised in France, lived in France, Holland, UK, South Africa, and I'm now based in Montreal. So it's actually morning for me, morning time. And yeah, I've been doing PR for over 10 years, and I basically worked in a lot of like hospitality industries, hotels. And then actually when COVID hit, that's kind of when I specialized in drinks, because that's when drinks needed the most visibility online. And my job is a lot of word of mouth. So it kind of just happened. And I loved it so much that I decided to keep that niche. Because drinks brands are often so passionate, and I really enjoy helping independently family-owned distilleries and companies to thrive, like you say, because we're trying to save the industry, and that's what I'm really passionate about. So that's what I've been doing for almost 10 years now, and I hope I can give some advice today that might help some brands do a bit of visibility work.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I mean, 10 years worth of experience. There's a lot of experience there. So let's dive deep into your brain. But let's start with, like, in basic terms, what is PR, and why would independent breweries need PR or to do PR?
I actually really love that first question, because there's a huge common misconception about PR, is that PR, a lot of brands, people in general, think that PR is literally just press relations. But PR is also public relations, and it's both of them together that are going to make like really strong campaigns. So PR, to try and cut a really long story short, is anything to do with your relationship with the press or with network, with the industry, relationships, brand relationships. Anyone you're speaking to can really be PR, basically.
Okay, so conversing with anyone, yeah, it makes sense. It is you're building that relationship.
PR. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
if you're talking about your brand, whether you're talking to your brand to a journalist or an industries person or another brand, you're actually doing PR.
Yeah, I suppose it's the relationship side of things, which is the important thing to bear in mind there. So,
absolutely.
What are the common misconceptions? I suppose, like you said, the big one is to think, well, it's just dealing with the press.
Yeah.
But there must be other things that you see, small drinks brands struggle with when it comes to PR time and time again. What are they?
Yeah, I think small brands, because that is also my specialty. I try and really help small brands emerge, and it's a lot more fun for me to help a brand grow than just kind of help a brand continue to be visible. But I think the issue with brands who don't really know what they should be doing with PR is they kind of splash money into advertising or even influencer work because it seems like an easy win, whereas PR is actually very much a longevity game where everything you're doing to build your visibility is going to make you be, what I love to say, remembered rather than just seen. And that's where brands go wrong. They just they want to be seen so badly that they'll quickly do like a few activations, social media partnerships here and there, and that's not going to be long term. That's not impactful.
But that's playing the long game in that case, right? You know, a quick social campaign is, yeah, it's one and done. It could run for a month and that's about it. But how can a brewery prepare for something like that to play the long game when it comes to PR?
So there's a lot of ways that you can basically be talking because that's what it's about. It's having a voice in the industry and within the media. So there's a lot of ways that you can do that. If we're speaking only about media, what you want to be doing is having a voice constantly for a long period of time. So basically like layering and spreading out everything you have to say, because that's something that brands struggle with, is knowing what to say and when to say it. That's where someone like me comes into play usually. But if they're trying to do things by themselves and for their own brand, the main thing is to start to kind of just layer comms in terms of, you know, what's your story, talk about that for a couple of months, speak to the media about that, and then maybe do some product launches, and maybe then you tie into a seasonal or industry event and talk about, I mean, I'm specialized in spirits, so cocktails would always come to mind, but you can make cocktails with beer sometimes. So you're basically layering out your comms so that for 6 months, a year, 2 years, you've got things to say, and then you want to bounce back on trends. That's something that's super important, is obviously being aware of what's happening in the industry. Let's say, I'm again not specialized in beer, so I might be super wrong saying this, but let's say blonde beers suddenly emerge in like a massive trend of like canned blonde. I mean, I know that a lot of beers have really cool labels. So, you know, how do you want to play about telling the story of your label? All these things, bouncing back on how the industry is trending, is also super important.
Okay, so there's multiple layers to it then, isn't there? You've of course got what is your brand story and the main narrative and who you are and what you're about. Then you say you've got that kind of seasonal side of things. So how does that integrate into, we've got Halloween coming up, then you've got Christmas and you've got various celebrations and whatnot. And then the third layer is the trending side of things. And like, okay, this is topical, we need to adjust and move and tweak. So I can see, is it a case of almost sitting down with a spreadsheet and going, okay, month 1, month 2, or quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3? Is it as simple as that?
That's actually exactly what it is. And for literally, that's a tool that I will build with my clients as soon as I start. But it's tools that, you know, brands can build themselves. But that's exactly what you're saying. It's a literal spreadsheet where you've got your brand news. So as a brand, you know what's happening. Are you launching a new product in January? Are you launching a brand partnership in June? So you've got all your brand elements. Then you've got seasonal events, so fairs, festivals, any kind of events, industry-led. Then obviously, like you said, seasonal, Mother's Day, Father's Day, all these things. And then you're kind of putting into at the bottom of this spreadsheet, then you're putting in, what do you want to say at what moment in time? You don't want to be saying too much for like at the same time. So that's why layering is super important. When you're speaking to the media, communication takes time. So if you start pitching, let's say, a product release, then by the time the conversations start happening with journalists, by the time the coverage starts coming out, you want to allow about 2 to 3 months, and then you maybe want to start talking about something else. So you're layering for sure.
Okay. And that is it challenging to find that kind of content which is evergreen enough that you're not almost 6 months into it and you're like, oh no, we've got to change it all. Like, this is a nightmare. We've got to start again.
Yeah. I think you can start talking and the results might not be super impactful. Maybe you'll start a campaign and you won't get that much like pickup and the coverage won't be great. That's fine. It happens. It even happens to professionals like me. Like, we choose an angle and the media don't really pick up on it. That can happen. Yes, you'll start again, but in any case, even if it is successful, you're starting again each time you start talking about something different.
And do you have to does it have to logically flow from like one story to another? Does there have, like, is it like a river, or can you literally start, stop, today we're talking about this, and then in 3 months time it's something completely different?
So I wouldn't say, in terms of whether you're talking to the media or talking to other brands, because you're trying to develop the public relations aspect and trying to make like collabs, it's not really about it doesn't have to make sense. It's more about your brand logic. So if you're just starting to communicate as a brand, you want it to be logical in what you're communicating. So let's say you're literally a new brand, and first of all, you're going to want to talk about your heritage and your story, and you're maybe going to want to talk about the founder. So that's going to be the first story. And then you're going to stop, obviously, logically going to want to start talking about your first and maybe key product, or maybe several at the same time. So it doesn't have to make sense for the person you're speaking to, but it does have to make sense as a brand, the news that you're putting out there, because obviously what you want to happen is for people to understand you. And obviously that's going to happen if you're telling the right story in the right order.
Yeah. So yeah, it is having that goal in mind, because then you can keep it brand aligned, can't you? Because, like,
Absolutely,
you don't get too far. Now, so a lot of this kind of stuff, like, what's the story that you tell, and then getting the story out there, I can see a huge crossover in the Venn diagram of like marketing and PR. Like, what is the separation, and where's the difference between the two?
We work together. I literally work hand in hand with the marketing or communication teams of all my clients. And it does happen that they don't have a team, because I do work with smaller brands. And in that case, I'm working with the founder. But obviously we actually even work, like, a strong PR campaign will work even better, especially for drinks brands, if you're also working with sales. So this is where I think, and I like to think that I do things differently than certain maybe like larger PR agencies, is that because I'm working with smaller brands and I'm a freelancer myself, I'm more involved. And that means that I can be involved with what sales are doing and what marketing are doing. So together, let's say it's a product launch and I'm communicating that product to the media, and maybe even talking to some brands for some collabs, maybe organizing an in-store event to get some liquid to lips, as we say. And aside from that, marketing has done obviously a really good job with the branding, and is maybe, creating some merch around that product so we can do some gifting. And then sales are also promoting that product in wine shops, on the on-trade. So if you think about it, if all us as a team were doing that together, then that's going to make the campaign so much stronger than if I'm just doing media relations about this one product. So, because when you think about a consumer journey, if you really want to buy in consumer trust and get your product sold, because ultimately that's what we all want, is to generate sales. If you think about the journey, if a consumer just sees a press article or a piece of coverage about that product that you're launching, they're very unlikely that they're going to go and click and buy.
Of course.
If that consumer sees that piece of coverage and then sees you in a wine shop, because maybe the salesperson has actually organized a tasting, and then sees you in a bar, that whole consumer journey means that maybe you'll have built a bit of education. Maybe the consumer would have read about you in the press article. They'll have tasted you in the wine shop, tasted you in the bar. But that's the three teams' work coming together, and meaning that the consumer has gone from they've seen you, so they've remembered you, and they've even purchased you, and maybe they've even become a loyal consumer because they enjoyed the story, they enjoyed the liquid, and boom, job done.
Yeah. So coming back to like the press side of things, you say it's not just press. That is the common misconception. That's where we started this conversation. But then the public relationship side of things, is that managed through what you put through the press, or is that a different kind of PR? I'm just trying to really separate out these elements.
Yeah, no, it is a different kind of PR. I'm doing things simultaneously if I'm working with a client. So I've got my press relations that are happening with, my press releases and my communication tools and the conversation that I'm having with journalists, and getting them to taste and all the elements that you can do with the press relation side of things. And then you've got the public relations side of things, where that's an ongoing job, but completely separate to what's happening in the press. Although obviously, if I'm promoting, again, coming back to the example of a product, if I'm promoting a product within my press relations, then I'm probably going to be promoting that product within my public relations. And maybe I'm organizing an event of some sort, a pop-up or a brand collab, and it's obviously likely that I'm promoting that same product at the same time, but it is two different paths, basically.
Yeah, and different channels for each, I would assume, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So if we've got brewery owners going, okay, like I can get like a year's worth of story together. I think I could pretty much do this. Like, what's the next step in terms of going, right, okay, phase one, I've got my stories now, and then we move on to a press release, correct? Is that where we move to?
that would be the basic literal basic tool to have if you want to start communicating, whether it's, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to start telling your story and maybe go back to like the why of the brand, why you exist, how you were created, maybe story about the founder. So that whole origin story, put that into a press release, and you can already start using that to send out to the media. That would be like basic, like you were saying, PR for dummies. That's the 101 of PR.
So break down for me what goes into a press release, because again, I've seen various levels of details in press releases, and not before, but from someone who's an industry specialist, like what needs to go into a press release so it gives it the best chance of landing on someone's desk or inbox and they go, okay, I'm interested in this, I want to know more.
Yeah, you want to do really straight to the point comms when you're writing up a press release. It's not like, as much as you're telling a story, you're not writing it like you're telling a story. It's very factual, because you've got to bear in mind that journalists receive so many press releases daily, so many emails from whether it's PRs or brands directly trying to tell their story. So what you want to be doing in the press release is going straight to the point, but putting in obviously the most important detail. And as drinks brands, also you want to be putting in, your price, where you're stocked, because that's super important if you're doing, let's say, local comms. So there's those factual elements, and then it is just really pinpointing the strength in what you're trying to say and putting it forward. It's a bit like a LinkedIn post. You want to attract the reader with your hook and get them to click on read more, which will technically be your subject line. So if you want to stand out in an inbox, that's another subject. Is that subject line is super important, because you want that to stand out, because you want the journalist to be interested and want to read it. So that's why it's super important to stay aware, like I said before, of trends, because the media want to be writing about things that are going to interest their readers, right? So trend-led stories are great. And actually at the moment, if you want to start talking about the story behind your brand and the founder story, let's say, those are elements that the media love at the moment, because they know that consumers nowadays love to know the story of the brands they're consuming. So that's very on trend to use that kind of origin story to communicate.
Nice. Well, most breweries, if not all of them, have some kind of origin story, so it's a great place to start.
Absolutely, exactly.
So if we break this down then, and so you've got like email, subject line, preview, you've got the actual email, and then a press release. Like, is it frowned upon to put the press release in the email? Does it have to be an additional PDF document? Like, what's the?
Yeah, I would definitely not put it in the center of the email, because again, it's like if you click on read more on a LinkedIn post and the LinkedIn post is like this big, you're probably not going to read it. And an email is the same, or any kind of content nowadays is the same. So you've got your subject line, which is supposed to be attention catching. And then you've got what we call a pitch email, and then you've got your press release, which is attached. So your pitch email is even more straight to the point than the press release. The press release, obviously, you're going into a bit more detail. So the pitch email, you want to put in there really the strongest element of what you want to say, So let's say you're a new brand, obviously, and I don't know, you're brewing or you're distilling or whatever you're creating, you're doing it with, let's say, sustainable. I'm going to use it like obviously really on trend element here, with really sustainable methods. Then you want to put that immediately in that pitch email, whatever that strong hook is, because you know that that's something that's that's your strength as a brand. So that's really important as a brand to pinpoint, whatever story you're telling, what's the strongest element in there, and putting it into that pitch email.
Right. So I can see it's almost like levels of expansion each and every
Yeah,
time. Your email subject line has to be like, what is the one thing?
yeah,
What's that hook point? What's the
yeah.
problem that you solve? Or, how is this like on trend, like you
Mm.
say? Then it's like, right, so let's just expand on that a little bit. Like, why should that person who's now given you the opportunity to pitch to them really
Yeah.
care? In what is it, like a paragraph or?
Yeah, a few lines just to say hi. Obviously, as we all know, personalization is key. So just try and find, obviously, you're looking for the name of the journalist you want to speak to. So, hi, Marie. And then you've got a few lines telling those facts. And if you think about it, if in your subject line it says something along the lines of the name of the brand that no one knows yet, then that's not actually going to work. You maybe want to talk about the category. So if you're an indie beer brand, you can say indie beer brand launches new sustainable, put those keywords in, but just obviously be aware that if you're mentioning the name of your brand immediately, then that actually might not be of interest yet, because you're really starting to build. And then same goes for the pitch. Go straight to the point of, what are you telling the journalist? In just a few lines, like you said, a paragraph is enough. And then obviously you've got your press releases attached.
And do press releases, do they need to look pretty? Like, I've received just Word documents in the past, but is it
Yeah,
worthwhile
I
investing
find
a bit
that
of time?
really bad. Yeah, I mean, nowadays it's so easy to do a bit of design that I find it really, really bad that a brand can put things into a Word document. Canva nowadays is so easy to use. I mean, maybe a journalist will say that they don't care, but I think for the image of a brand, it's really important to have something that's nicely designed. It doesn't have to be amazing, but just nicely designed. And then to bounce back on that, there is actually a really, really important point that brands neglect, is how important photography is. Photography is so important. If you want to start communicating and you've got no photography, there's no point even starting. The media will always ask you for high resolution imagery if you want to be featured. And it's happened to me before that the brand's imagery wasn't good enough, that the journalist has gone and chosen another brand instead just because the images look good. I mean, when you think about it, we live in a world of Instagrammable content and really good looking labels and brands, and there's a reason behind that, because we live in a world where people like good looking things. And a journalist is not going to feature a brand if the image looks really bad. So that's actually something that you really want to start by investing in, is a photography session where your bottles, it can be a lifestyle decor, maybe your bottles are set somewhere inside your brewery, or landscape, and then you've got your bottle shots, white background, super simple, but that's like so important. There's no point starting to communicate if you don't have that.
That's a really, really great piece of advice there.
Yeah,
Yeah, because the story is one thing, like you say, but
yeah,
no one's just going to put a bucket load of text in a piece of print. They want to,
yeah.
beautify it. So would that be as simple as you've got your press release, you've laid it out nice, you put your key points in there, but you're not telling the whole story, and then you put a link where you can get high res images? Is that the best approach?
So you put an image in the press release.
Hmm.
Always add a picture at basically at the top of the press release. Obviously, you've got your title, whatever you're announcing, and then you've got a picture just to illustrate whatever you're talking about. Whether, again, if it's a product launch, you're going to have that picture of that product. So this is a nice tip as well. If you're a brand doing PR yourself, it's going to be likely that you don't have a media tracking system, which we have as PRs, because obviously it's necessary. But if you're just doing a bit of PR for your own brand, you're not going to be probably not going to be paying for that. So actually, I would recommend not putting a link. And what you're putting at the end of the press release is telling the journalist that imagery is available upon request, but don't put the link in there, because otherwise they can help themselves and then they might feature you and you don't know that they featured you because you don't have a tracking system. So that's a bit of a tip that I use for certain clients who aren't paying for tracking, because at least then the journalist is going to come back to you and say, do you have any high resolution imagery? Can I have some images to illustrate this? And sometimes they'll even come back saying they want an interview. So, the conversation starts going. But yeah, that's a bit of a tip, just so you can make sure that you know where you're being featured. Because if the journalist asks you for an image, then again, chances are they're going to feature you, and then you can go back and send them the images. And because obviously journalists have so much to do that they're not necessarily going to think of sending you the link towards the article. So then you can go back and be like, hi, did you feature this? And can I have a link to the article?
That makes so much sense. Love it. Okay. So now we've worked out, we've got our year's worth of content. We've been able to structure a decent subject line, a paragraph to pitch, our press release actual attached document that looks pretty. It's got an image in there. And then we're going to tell a
good one.
Yeah, exactly. Then we're going to tell the person to get in touch if they want more images. How on earth do we work out who we should send this to? Like, that's a big thing, right? Because there are many journalists out there. But how do you get their information? How do you find the right ones?
So this is where it's obviously going to be quite timely for brands who want to do PR by themselves, because obviously as a PR consultant or PR agencies, we pay for basically databases of journalists with all the emails in there, and you can search them by theme, topic, here and there. So for us, it's super easy. If a brand wants to be doing PR for themselves, these databases are actually super expensive. So if we're talking about brands on a budget, like this is kind of the theme of the podcast, it is just a matter of researching. So you're going to go and obviously you'll always, brands always know some of the key media, like Bar Magazine, Drinks Business, Spirits Business. We all know those basics. Put them into a spreadsheet. Start categorizing, the media that you find that you want to be in. If you're a brand owner, you'll know, because you're staying aware of who's talking about what. And then it's just going into those platforms. So again, Drinks Business, Spirits Business, go and find who's talking about beer. And at the top of that article, most likely the name is there. So it's lengthy process to go and find them. And then what you can also do if you want to find the email address is, often if you type in if you're asking Google for the media pack, so let's say you type in media pack Drinks Business have their media pack on their website, and inside a media pack is a whole load of information about advertising, about upcoming themes, about all these things. And then at the bottom, some media put in email addresses of the retail editor, beer editor, spirits editor. So that's a way of finding the email address. And then otherwise, again, a bit lengthy, but you can, if the media pack's not online, you can email the generic contact at, Drinks Business, and ask them for the right person to contact if you've got some beer news. So yes, it is a bit of a lengthy process. And that's why I think if you're doing PR by yourself, don't try and have loads of coverage. Just really try and pinpoint the most impactful publications for you, because it's already taken quite a bit of time. But then if you do start having those conversations, you'll start building that email list. And
I suppose, can you leverage LinkedIn as well? If you get the name of one, you can find them out on there.
Absolutely.
DM.
Yeah, social media, absolutely. Go and send them an email saying, hi, I'd love to share my news with you. Would you mind sharing your email address? You can absolutely do LinkedIn or even Instagram for that.
And what about nurturing the relationship? Once you've got a journalist on side, or you've sent something to a journalist, I can't imagine it's a far stretch of the imagination to go, maybe the first one doesn't hit, so you don't hear back from them. Is it fine to keep on sending them stuff, or how do you best manage that kind of relationship?
Yeah, no, that's super important, because this is press relations and public relations. So you do have to be really careful about how you're building them. I think that for drinks brands, the really great leverage that you can use is follow up with a gifting opportunity. So let's say you've sent a press release to a journalist, and it is most likely, if they don't know you, that you will not hear back. Let's be fair. You can follow up and say, hi, just checking that you received this. And if you'd like to taste the product, I can send you a bottle, a gifting pack, whatever the brand has in terms of merchandising. I think that's because a lot of brands outside of the drinks industry can't do that. That's a really strong leverage opportunity for drinks brands, because it is really easy and really cheap to send a few bottles of whatever product you're promoting to a journalist. And if you've got a bit of merchandising, coasters, a tote bag, whatever merch you've got, just follow up and offer them something. And if you really want to put time into PR, suggest a meeting, suggest taking them to maybe such and such bar that has your product there, and taste it together there, or take them for a really nice lunch if you do have a bit of budget for a nice lunch, because journalists do like to be treated. That is a fact. They get invited out a lot. So if you don't have the budget, offer some gifting. If you have a bit more and you've got time to leverage and create some relationships, take them out, meet them, have a tasting with them.
Brilliant. Yeah, I suppose that sending product is just another wonderful opportunity to show the strength of your brand and personalization as well. Like if you put another letter in there, or you really put some consideration into it.
Yeah.
Really nice tip. I like that. Very, very strong. Okay. So we found the right people. You say the journalist, hey, they've done it. They want to write a piece. What then? Like you've sent them the images. They're going to post the article. What should you be doing? Like you've got to double down on it, I assume. Like once an article goes live, like what's the next steps?
So there's a lot of things that you can do with an existing article. I mean, the great thing about online today is that means you're going to start appearing on Google. So already as a brand, that's giving you some credibility, and that's why PR is actually so important. If you're, again, just starting to build, just the fact that you're present, and that's also why the storyline that we were talking about earlier needs to make sense, because if someone's Googling you and all there is product info, but nothing about your brand story, then that's not great for the brand, because that's not going to create loyal consumers. So there's a lot of things you can do once you've got that first piece of coverage. I mean, obviously share it on all imaginable platforms. And then maybe what you can do, if the journalist has gone to the point where they want to talk about you, probably means that they enjoy your product, or they like the story. And if you haven't done it yet, again, take them out, because that's nurturing that relationship where if they've written about you that first time, it is worth investing at least, expenses for a meeting, because let's say you've started just telling your story and that journalist has covered that. Take them out, have a meal, discuss, and then when your next product's going to be launched, you can go straight back to that journalist and say, hi, this is my news. And it's very likely, if you've already built a bit of a relationship, that they're going to feature you, the next news that comes. So it's nurturing the relationship, sharing it as much as possible on social media, and keep going.
So say you take that journalist out, or you invite them to the tap room after a successful article has been published. Would that be the time where you start to hint at, like, we've got these other things that we're planning to talk about, and you use it as like a litmus test, I suppose?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what PR really is a salesperson selling a story rather than a product with a price. So whatever a salesperson is doing, and we've all done a bit of sales if you're building a brand. Even I've done sales for some of my clients, because we all end up at some point, selling. But what PR really is you're just selling a story rather than a product with a price. So all that nurturing and what you're trying to tease in terms of what's upcoming is all part of what a sales strategy would be. So yeah, PR is the same.
And how do you know if it's worked? Like if it was worth the time? Does that come back to the goals that you would have started with? Like you're measuring against that, or are there other metrics and data you should be looking at?
So there are some just kind of basic metrics with PR. Is obviously you're looking at the number of impressions that your article has generated. So to be fair, nowadays with AI and Google, you can easily, if the drinks business has featured you, just type in the link on an AI platform or on Google and ask what the impressions are on this page, and you'll get your response. So, but then you want to log them yourself, because you want to be, like you say, kind of tracking the investment behind what you're doing. And then you've got the advertising equivalent. And the advertising equivalent is a bit more tricky because there are some kind of, I'm not going to go into nitty gritty detail of this because it is quite tricky, because there are some like formulas that you can use. But again, type it into AI, often they can, the platform can find, or again, it's written on the media pack. So often on a media pack, there'll be like, if you've paid for a 1-page ad, which is 2,000, let's say 2,500 euros, but you've generated a 1-page feature from your comms with that journalist, you can consider, and there's a bit of a some people don't like AV, advertising value equivalent, and some people, because it's a tricky one to use, because a paid ad is probably just going to feature like a picture and a title. Whereas your editorial, because that's advertorial versus editorial, those are different terms for PR, your editorial piece will have a lot more information, educative information, and it's worth technically a lot more than that 2,500 euro ad, right? So that's why advertising equivalent is tricky, but at the same time, it is a metric that you can use as a brand to see, to track if it was worth it.
I get that. Because, yeah, I suppose that there's always everyone talks about ROI, right? Return on investment, and it's the time investment. So what do you get from it? So if you're a brewery, you're going, I'm going to do something, like, what's the first thing they need to start with? Like, kind of first step to make PR work for them?
I think it's what we were saying earlier about the that spreadsheet about your story. The first thing you want to do is pinpoint it's working your storytelling, really. So pinpointing for the next 6 months, what are you talking about as a brand? Are you literally just launching and want to tell your origin story? That could be the first thing you want to start talking about. And then maybe in 3 months, talk about your first product. Like if that's that can be a really easy starting point. Write up that press release about your brand origin, and then start sending it out to the journalists that you'll have identified because you've done your research online. And then 3 months later, start talking about that first or signature product, or whatever is the first product you want to start talking about. But again, I think the first thing you want to do is work that storytelling and pinpoint the angles that are going to be impactful for you as a brand, which again, if you've never done any comms, is most likely going to be your story, who you are as a brand, who you are potentially as a founder. I know a lot of founders don't like talking about themselves. That's always a tricky one for me. I do try and get them to talk because it just gives more, emotional attachment to consumers, knowing who's founded that brand. And that's so important nowadays. So yeah, work the storytelling, put it into that spreadsheet as to how you're going to be communicating at what time of year, write up that press release, send it out, and start doing your follow-ups. And that can be pretty simple, although a bit lengthy, but pretty simple PR for a brand if they want to start out.
Love it. So it's basically work through this podcast blow by blow, what we've said.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
Love it. This has been really, really valuable, Elsa. I think there's so much in here that if they have the time, breweries can give it a go and see what they can get on. It's always a trade-off between time and money, whatever anyone's doing. You've either got the time, you've got the money, you've got neither of it. And if you don't have either of it, don't do it right now.
Absolutely.
But if people wanted to know a little bit more, if they wanted to pick your brains about PR, if they wanted to follow along, find out what else you do, where could we send them?
So I talk a lot on my LinkedIn page. I post a lot about PR. I talk, obviously, my niche is spirits, but I've done so many other industries in the past that I can. And actually, everything I've just said today is applicable to any F&B brand, really. So those basics, the PR basics, are very much applicable to any industry. So yeah, LinkedIn, and then elsacargill.com. My services are on there, and I've actually created some digital tools to help brands do PR for themselves. So amazing. There's a lot to be seen there as well.
Get your hands on some digital tools. I love it. I love it. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining me for this chat. I think it's been great. We've literally been able to break it down step by step in terms of like dipping your toes into the water of PR and what that means. So, Elsa, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Tim, for having me.
You're very welcome. Everyone else who's taken the time out of their busy day to listen in, always appreciated, Always love that you do that, and I will continue to serve you as best as I can, my friends. Until next time, be good to each other and rock on.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap on this week's episode of Branding for Breweries. If you got something great from it, hit follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite streaming app. Or even better, leave a review, share it with your brewery pals, or get in touch, because I want to chat to you. Rock on!